G'day, welcome to a Real Talk with Vince. So we're lucky enough in this interview to have our first legislative candidate, and I'll trip over my tongue, Mark Aldridge from the United Australia Voice Party. Now, Mark is, of course, the leader of that party, and he's had that one. That's our first time running this year, I think, as this party. Now, the South Australian Legislative Council is a house of review who don't run departments, who scrutinise and amend and, if necessarily, block legislation. So we're going to be asking tonight, or in this interview, I should say, how you'll be using those powers. So welcome, Mark. And first off, mate, give us a little bit of a rundown of who you are and Australia Voice, please.
Well, look, I got in the political arena, I think, I'll keep it brief. I think I was much younger and handsome at the time, back in 2001. And we'd been out on a bike ride and came back and everyone said, politics sucks. That was a long time ago, 25 years ago, 24 years ago. And your nickname since, you're good at fixing things, so why don't you get into Parliament and do that? I ran for the Senate and with my wife, and found out pretty quickly that the political system was very broken, the electoral system was broken, and I didn't like being denied a fair chance, and so I've continued to fight ever since. I mean, along the way, you do a lot of things that aren't sensible in terms of which parties you work with, which ones you don't. But I've generally been a community advocate, so I've been in the courts for a long time, fighting for freedom of choice for in elections. I've fought in the Court of Spirit of Returns quite a few times. I've been in most of the courts in South Australia on a regular basis. Freedom of speech being one of those things I went to the High Court with under the Constitution. Your freedom when it came to your medical choices at one stage, that was very big, as you know, not long ago. And I set up things for markets. So I set up markets for the farmers to help feed the homeless and look after people. I do disaster response. So if there's a fire or something like that, the government are usually inept and don't act for weeks and weeks. So it's always good to get in from day one, find out what people need, deliver to them. I found that was really good. It proved how good Australians were when I called out for help and got that help immediately. The party itself grew out of the voice arguments, going back a couple of years ago with the voice to Parliament. We opposed that, and most of my people that help support me are Aboriginal people, so they were against it as well. And so the party grew from there. We set up nearly 2 years ago. It's taken this long to get registered, to get past all the red tape. And then, of course, directly after getting through that red tape, the South Australian government amended all the legislation on elections again. And so it's been jumping through hoops continuously, which is why we feel like we're a bit behind in terms of launching properly. But we've been online for just over 16 months. Our social medias are doing well. We get about 30 million views a month, and we've got about 260,000 followers across 2 platforms. So we're very happy with that. And the team I've got together are generally people like me. So they're people that have run for parties. One of them even ran for the Democrats going back that long ago. But we're advocates, so we've got people that advocates for men's groups advocates. We've got advocates in animal welfare. We've got advocates for children. We've got advocates for the elderly. We've got NDIS advocates as well. So we're kind of a group of activists that actually do stuff on the ground. And I like that idea because I figured if the people I work with care more about the community than money, then it's less chance they'll get corrupted down the track if they get elected under my name or any other. So that's sort of the build-up of the party.
Okay. Now, it's my understanding that you're running 12 candidates in the House of Assembly, mainly from the northern area of the suburbs. Is that correct?
14. We've got 14 candidates in the lower house. Okay. We're restricted. They've changed the whole role of how elections run. So it's all now funded by the state. So the state Labor have come out and said, we've stopped donation laws. But all they did really was, in fact, empower themselves to get the same sort of funding they've always had, but through the public purse. And that limits new parties like ourselves with the funding allocation to 15. The larger parties that have formed before can all get funding for up to 47 seats. So it did restrict us. We'd like to have run a lot more seats.
Okay, that's interesting. I haven't got to my questions yet, but that raised another question that I've got. An independent by the name of Cody Scholes, which is down in Mount Gambier. He put out a reel just recently where he's saying he's got to submit every week a donations form to the AEC. Well,
Basically,
if you can't get donations, why do you have to submit a form?
we can't ask for donations. They're changing that rule a little bit, so we could ask for instance, say you give me $50 and get away with it. But if it's any more than that, any reasonable amount of donation from a small business, something like that, we have to declare that and have to declare all your details. We have to put in returns every week as to what we've spent and what we've earned. Obviously, we can't raise money, so why put in that? And we put in receipts. What makes it worse, we put in receipts, say, for radio and some printing, and then they want actually us to get it audited. And we've been putting in applications not to have to audit it because obviously there's not a lot of auditing involved with making 2 receipt payments. But they are really making it hard. It's been extremely awkward. I've only just, as of today, finished all the red tape off, I believe, and that leaves me 2 weeks to fire up properly. And of course, we didn't trust the Electoral Commission. We had a lot of trouble with the Electoral Commission, so we were unwilling to go into debt before we had that money in front of us, if that makes sense. And that has really put us behind. The second part of the funding was meant to come at the return of the writ. We never received it. We had to wait a week or so. They'd say things like, well, we'll get around to it. And I said, well, you can get around to it, fine, buy one. But I mean, the problem here is that the funding is meant to come on this date. Why hasn't it? Why has it come to some and not others? Because obviously in politics, most of us smaller parties and some of the major parties talk behind the scenes about how we may or may not prefer others and how we may run the campaigns to try and, in our case, target the left of politics, take votes away from them. And so it's disadvantaged us heavily, and it's major advantage to the Labor Party because they spent nearly $50 million of state money before the election, promoting how good they are, and now they have millions of dollars of public funds to spend when we have, a few thousand. Which is, I'm not complaining about getting some funding, but it's very unfairly put together.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for answering that. All right. So the first question off the rank is energy affordability. In future energy legislations, risk is increasing household power bills. What amendments would you require before supporting?
Well, first of all, we've got to turn away from net zero. It's not working for us at all. There's no foundation of science for net zero. The fact that they're calling solar and wind turbines renewable is a joke. I mean, they're not. They're not cost effective. They don't run 24/7, so they can't supply baseload power. Our policy is very simple. The fastest and the most effective way to get back on our feet in South Australia, we have a place called Torrens Island, which has got 4 boilers, or had 4 boilers. Those boilers were on their end of life, and so they've been running desalinated water through those boilers. We've said we need to replace all 4 boilers and go back to LPG, which is connected already. We have plenty of it, and start generating baseload power at a more affordable price, and stop the rollout of the supposed renewables until they are. So in other words, until they have end of life abilities, so they can stop destroying the environment to put them in. And we look at the genuine cost to the environment of the creation, the shipping, and the erection of these things, and the limited lifespan they have. So there's no miracles on the table. We need power now. We need it affordable. It's wiping out industries. It's hurting everyday Australians, and it's definitely having an adverse effect out here in the farmlands where the pickers, the growers need to run cool rooms, big cool rooms, and it's actually killing them. So we do need some sort of effective, immediate changes to how we create power here, how reliable it is, and the cost of power.
Okay, so I believe One Nation is saying that they would actually rebuild the Port Pirie coal-fired power station. Would you be in support of that?
Nothing wrong with it at all. It's broken, it's damaged. We need to worry about the baseload power in the state first, the earliest thing. I would look at that, and I would look at, I don't know whether LPG or coal's better in that particular location, but at best I know there's not much left of that plant, so we need to work effectively in the best places possible. I don't mind that at all. But they're talking about, if I remember correctly, looking at completely rebuilding it. In other words, not working with what the structure's there, but rebuilding a complete plant, and that just takes too much time. So Torrens Island's the most effective, easiest way to go. But we do have people in our party that work there. So we have people that have the inside goss as to how effectively we could reinvigorate that. They also have batteries and other small gas turbines there now, which are meant to be the backup, but they're not big enough. So all the infrastructure already runs there for the rest of the state. So I think probably the primary concern would be that. I wouldn't be opposed to extra coal-fired plant whatsoever. I just think that we have to act quickly on this.
Yep. Okay. So that sort of answers the next question: is would you vote against our energy legislation if independent modelling showed it increased household costs? So I gather that would be a yes.
Oh, absolutely. Green power is not helping us at all. It's not renewable, as I said. I have no objection to it being used in strategic locations like businesses. So a small industry that's got a couple of wind turbines on site, solar panels and batteries on site to assist it, or like a home system, they're quite effective, and I have no problems with that. The problem is the grid isn't really set up to take power back from those. We really need that base load power, but I don't have any objection to the continuance of these household systems and small systems for industry.
Okay. All right. Would you support mandatory cost of living impact statements for major legislation before it's passed in the upper house?
Absolutely. We've got a serious run of problems there. We have a run of problems with lack of support for the producers, farmers and producers. We have the power cost, the housing cost, as you know, but there's a variety of on costs from that, from cost of fuel right through to transport and various other things where red tape's strangling everything. I mean, we could effectively change a swag of legislation that would empower people, particularly our farmers, with water. I mean, we've got a situation where they won't allow them to even put in dams when they're running short of water to collect excess runoff from their roofs. So, there's a serious amount of legislation change needed to bring back accountability in cost of living. But we definitely would like to provide that everything that structurally goes through that upper house, which is where I'll be sitting, that we look at the effects on the general public in terms of cost of living and effectively block anything that's inaccurate.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Would you support reviewing or amending existing laws that expand government control over private property, and what changes would you push?
There's too many bits of legislation that do that. It's really hard to pinpoint that down to one piece of legislation. You've got the Environmental Act, which supposedly allows government to ask you questions and you must answer. They allow coming onto land, bulldozing dams, bulldozing farms, fencing off infrastructure like local rivers and stuff like that. There's just too many bits of legislation to think about one particular one. I think I would have a team within my party room, if I was elected in the upper house, to just review each piece of legislation that's passed in maybe the last 20 years, look for those sections that undermine liberties or undermine housing or undermine anything, and seek to have amendments pushed through. And that might work well if we have a broad spectrum of independent thinkers like One Nation, myself and others into the upper house. We can use as a block so that we can leverage those changes with whoever's elected into Parliament.
Excellent. Okay. Should the Legislative Council strengthen community objection rights in planning laws?
That's one of the biggest problems we have. Excuse me. I'll give you a perfect example of that, and we do have to do this. Out here, there was a lot of land built on what they call 2.5 acre allotments, where they had the house built at the back and the sheds to the left. That leaves a massive block of land at the front of these properties, and we could be building small 20, 30 foot container homes there as emergency housing or as low cost effective housing or rentals for the public. And the amount of legislation and development laws that are undermining those sorts of opportunities are ridiculous. We even looked at low cost housing by having these houses built and then shipped here, which they work effectively to arrive at about 120 grand. And then, you throw more money at building the block and the foundations and the plumbing and everything, comes to a couple of $100 grand, which means you could build a house for $500,000 instead of having to pay nearly $1 million over here for a house. And the development law doesn't allow it development law doesn't allow a lot of things. For instance, sake, I run markets for the farmers to sort of get those farmers have an extra income by selling direct to the public. We went to bat. I ended up in the High Court trying to battle regulatory change at council level, which means that those markets. Remember the old church fetes they'd have, and the women would come along and sell their lamingtons to raise money for a good cause. All of those things now are frowned upon by development law, and it's very awkward to have them. That's why you're not seeing them anymore. And if we had our way, we think there should be more of them. I think community getting together and trading with each other is a fabulous thing to see.
Right. So in that, this is an offshoot question, not in the list. They brought in some legislation last year where they talked about the government having the ability to come in and take control of some of your land if it is underutilised.
Look, I think that got dropped. It was interesting. We would oppose that 100%, but that is a global push because I was in Indonesia at the International Water Conference, and I was chatting to some Indonesian activists over there and some guys from about 4 other countries in a pub, and they've tried that there. So over there, they're saying you've got land to retire in, you haven't used that land or built on that land, therefore we, the government, can come in and take that away. Now, that is absolutely ridiculous law, and constitutionally, I don't think there's any validity to it, but that doesn't stop parliaments, particularly state parliaments, from trying to introduce it. So I'd be adamantly opposed to that, and I would actually file with the High Court if I had to, if I couldn't get consensus in the Legislative Council, the Constitution, to have that reviewed by the High Court.
Excellent. All right. Would you support making health system performance reportability legally binding and publicly transparent?
Sorry, you dropped out a smidgen there. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
That's right. Yeah, I'll repeat it for you. Would you support making health system performance reporting legally binding and publicly transparent?
Absolutely. In South Australia at the moment, we have a situation where not only do we have the most ramping in the country, but we also have under delivering local doctors' services, and we also have hospitals running at somewhere between 140, 180, 200%. So we need that reporting to be urgently looked at, and we need to urgently consider building new hospitals here, subject to getting them ready. State governments here, excuse me, mate. State governments here seem to look at the term between elections rather than the long distance future. With this mass migration we're dealing with now, our hospitals are in terrible state of affairs. And if we were to build 3 hospitals tomorrow, I think we'd still be in some trouble in the next 5 years that we need even more.
Okay. Well, just another one to throw in off the cuff, not part of the scripted questions. Were you aware that the Royal Adelaide Hospital is leased by the health department from another company?
Yeah. It was built on taxpayer funds, then handed over to a private contractor who leases it back to us, or we pay lease costs for them running it. And what made that worse is that it replaced a hospital that was okay, it was aging, but parts of that hospital had just been renovated. So we didn't even maintain the sections of the old hospital, and we've now got a hospital that's smaller than we had before, and that's running on average at about 170%. In other words, it wasn't built big enough in the first place.
Grab yourself a drink if you want, Mark.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I just had something go down the wrong way a minute ago.
Well, I believe you've been talking all day because you're on radio earlier this morning, so probably running out of voice.
A long one. I should be right now.
All right. Now I've got to catch up where. So, would you support making health systems? I did that one. Should parliamentary committees have stronger powers to compel transparency from SA Health?
Absolutely. The committees that we see wandering around are generally not very well balanced. In other words, they're weighted with one-sided politics, and so therefore, if there's issues that arise from the way in which any particular department is run that goes against the grain, hide that. I think we need better transparency. That's why we need the electorate to consider seriously getting behind some of the independent voices into the upper house to enable that to happen.
Okay. Should the existing emergency power laws be amended or strengthened, should they be amended to strengthen sunset clauses and parliamentary oversight?
That's the new miscellaneous
That's the new
management
ones
act.
that they've just put out. Yeah.
It should be dropped altogether. It's rubbish. Junk. None of it makes any sense. It shouldn't be there in the first place. It should be. I don't think you can amend something so damaged. But if amending was all we had as an option, yeah, we'd amend it. But personally, I think the whole piece of legislation is rubbish, and we shouldn't have to endure that existing.
Okay. No worries. Thank you. Would you support a formal parliamentary review into the long-term impacts of COVID mandates?
Absolutely. Yeah, just tell them I won't be long. Well, I'll be a while. Sorry, mate. That's our legal advisor for the party, but he's only dropping in for a beer, so it's all good. Now I'm off topic.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
can you
we
read
were
that
talking
question
about
again,
COVID.
mate? Sorry.
It was about COVID mandates and the
Ah,
long-term impacts of it.
there needs to be a full inquiry. The COVID mandates weren't constitutional, in my opinion. They were feral. They've been damaging. I think there needs to be an inquiry both into the application of those laws. Interestingly enough, if Section 51 doesn't cover the rest of us, why did it cover the courts? So the courts, the court staff, and the parliaments, people in parliament weren't mandated and couldn't be mandated as a result of the protection of the Constitution. That protection does not stop at people elected or employed by the state. It should have gone all the way down to all of us. I think there should be an inquiry into that. And I think there should be an inquiry into the adverse reactions that we're seeing, and we know they happen. Everyone might be ignoring it, but I think there should be consequences, work into finding out, just how damaging that rollout was. And I think there should be damages applied to the state that decided to do that. Personally, I think that's a massive issue, and I'm glad you brought that one up.
Yeah. Some of the other candidates I've talked to have specified that, but really, isn't that just going to be the taxpayers paying back the taxpayers? Because
it is no such thing as government money. Every cent these bastards spend is our money. I mean, they're doing an expressway out here. It started at 9.9 billion. It's bounced out to about 14, 15 billion, and will end up at $20 billion. $20 billion, what's that? That'd be about $25,000 per person in the state. So, if they can throw away money like that on something that's not necessarily a priority in the state, I'm sure they can pay some damages to some of these people that lost their careers, their jobs, their businesses, and everything else. But I still don't know how powerful these deals were done that indemnify the pharmaceutical companies, and I would be looking very closely at those, because the pharmaceutical companies, I believe, misled Parliament to a degree, and I think for that reason they should be also capable, so some of that money comes from their profits.
Okay, cool. If legislation expands regulations of online political speech, what safeguards would you insist on before supporting it?
I'd never support anything that undermines any of our rights to speak. Even bad speech should be protected. The Constitution is very clear in representative democracy that there must be a very open line of communication between those people offering to run as candidates like myself and the voting public, and that's a two-way street. And it doesn't just extinguish in the terms between elections. It's a finding called Lang. It's a very powerful High Court challenge, but you can't take away free speech of anybody without inadvertently undermining it for everybody. I mean, that's a federal issue. I think we need a federal Bill of Rights that should be attached to the schedule of the Constitution, so that it clearly defines those things and can be taught in our schools, so kids grow up realising the power they have. I think a lot of it's bluff. I don't see how they can possibly take away the free speech on social and political matters. I do probably support attempts to quell speech where its intent is to cause violence or create violence, hatred and violence. But that's a slippery slope, to be honest.
Okay, all right. Would you support amendments that prioritise victims' rights and community safety in sentencing laws?
Absolutely. the judicial system in South Australia is as broken as it is in most places in the world. The common law rights of citizens have been eroded for a long time, and generally you're looking at legislative law, and you could be accused of something, and it costs you thousands of dollars, and then prior to trial, you realise that the other side, usually the police prosecution, finds out there's no case, and then you're paying the bill with no right of any damages. I think there needs to be a complete change in the judicial system, but that has to be done by empowering the courts to a degree to make decisions that are in the best interest of the community. People seem to forget that the justice system was created around common law so that you had a jury of your peers, so that the social decisions made were based on how society felt about a particular topic at any one time. And now that we've taken that away, it's become legislative, and the legislators really are so far removed from social norms that they can't write legislation when it comes to judicial outcomes that's very sensible at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on for the next one. You're doing some great answers there. Thanks, Mark. Should major housing or planning legislation require independent infrastructure capability assessments?
Well, the problem is it's not. Well, hang on. The problem is it's meant to. We've got an estate out here that was built called River Lee. When they built the River Lee estate, they knew it was on a floodplain. So people had tried to build there for decades in South Australia, and the government turned them down. Then another guy comes along, does a deal with the government at a big party where he has seats where it's come and meet the premier, blah blah blah. They raise millions of dollars for the Labor Party, and all of a sudden he's got a right to build there. He built there. They didn't have adequate water infrastructure. They still don't. They're trying to effectively fix that now. They didn't have any sewage infrastructure. They still don't. In other words, they're trucking out sewage 3 or 4 trucks a day. They have no road transport. Is onto a road that's single lane when you try and get into any of the suburbs. So the roads are now absolutely packed out here, and we've got a situation where there's not even postal service there. So you've got to have total reforms in development law to allow for that. And those reforms must include the protection of primary farmland out here. They're presently running water and sewage and water and sewage pump stations just near me, and this is primary farmland. And Labor's refusing to say why, but I think the purpose is to use up primary farmland to put residential on it, because it's closer to the resources they need, rather than build the resources and make sure they have the right essential services and build these subdivisions in areas that aren't going to affect farmland. But there's a lot to do there, and we're working on that. We're trying to work on innovative ways to do it, but at the moment, Labor are throwing so much money around this election. It's what they're not saying that's most dangerous, and most of the things they're offering generally aren't kept. Offers promises they don't keep anyway.
Okay. If you were to hold the balance of power, what non-negotiable principles would guide your vote?
Electoral reform. Electoral reform would be one. I think we need that. We need the right to freely choose. I think we could change the political landscape by looking at electoral reform, although most people out there wouldn't understand that, so it's not going to be high on their agenda. I'd like to see obviously housing reform. I'd like to see let's go back. Let's start again. First things first. There's 100,000 people in this country homeless, 170, I think it is. Let's get all the people off the streets. Let's get them all into homes. Let's start there, right? That's important, okay? If you can't look after your homeless, there's something seriously wrong. So get them all into homes. We need to stem migration and match migration to essential needs only. So migration reform is a particularly powerful thing we could do right now to effectively bring in immediate change. We must stop foreign investment in this state. Any sort of foreign investment in terms of real land, real estate, land, water, farms, they shouldn't be able to buy them. I don't know where to stop with that one. A Bill of Rights, you could ask for a Bill of Rights at a state level, but then they can change that later. So that's really got to be a constitutional amendment, but it wouldn't hurt to at least try and draft a Bill of Rights for South Australians, which Victoria have, but as you know, they can just change that overnight. So I'm not sure how powerful that would be. We'd probably have to have a Bill of Rights state-wise that we can somehow control. I mean, things change if you get better people into parliaments, but if you have majority governments, they can really do anything they like. So there's a lot of reforms needed, and I wouldn't know where to start. I don't like seeing people living on the street. That's ridiculous in this country, a rich country. I'd like to see control of assets like power generation, our gas assets, have a supply at cost to create power so that power is affordable. I'd like to see more water infrastructure put in place because the desal plants aren't working for us very well at all, if you know much about South Australia's oceans right now. And so there's a lot of things, but I think you'd have to start the grassroots up and just make sure we bring everybody out of poverty and make sure that everybody's safe in the streets and safe, and the kids are safe to go to school. And of course, education. I mean, we've really got to seriously look at this work in the schools. I think it's dangerous, and I'd like to see that dropped at least in a primary school setting, and then at a higher school level. Well, then we have to look at that in more detail.
Excellent. Okay. If a piece of legislation was brought out, well, you're sort of the leader of your party, so this question's a little bit irrelevant. But if a piece of legislation was brought out by a party that you support or within your party that conflicts with your stated privileges, would you cross the floor for it?
Everybody in my party, I can promise you, has been told that they vote on behalf of the electorate that they're voted in to represent. And we don't see that enough. I think that's been one of the weak downfalls of parties like One Nation, because One Nation are a fledgling party with very little representation. But over the years, for every 3 people that get elected into Parliament, they lose 2 because they have this sort of system situation where you must follow party policy. The Labor are just as bad. Liberals offer, the ability for their people to have a conscience vote on certain topics. But I think that if you elect somebody to be your representative, regardless of the party, that person must be free from outside pressure to represent the electorate that they're chosen by. And I think that's an important thing to have for every party.
I think the only person in the Liberal Party is Alex Antic, and I only think he does that is because he's got a power base here in South Australia. But anyway,
he's real good. He's real good. Alex is a hell of a good operator and a really nice guy. Yeah, got 100% time for him.
All right. So, would you oppose future retrospective legislation that's outside of serious criminal matters? Would you like an explanation
on that? That's an interesting question. I like that. Outside of serious criminal. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Retrospective legislation is dangerous, let's be honest, if it's brought out on a range of topics, because obviously you don't want to be suddenly tied up at having committed the crime when at the time what you did was legal. I have to really give thought to that, because I'm not sure, thinking of legislation going through my head at the moment, maybe my mind's too busy to think of where I'd want to apply that. In criminal cases, I get it, absolutely. There'll be some cases like there's probably cases like the Mulligan inquiry and special inquiries into child crimes that have been buried, and I think that they should be able to be unburied, even though the decision was made years ago. There might be some policies that are set in concrete that ought not have been there in the first place where we could do that. But no, I don't have any real answers for you. I'm trying to think. I just was trying to think of something that resonated with me at the time, but I can't think of anything at this moment. When we finish, I'll sit there going, "Oh."
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so closing questions. What's one type of law you would refuse to pass regardless of party pressures?
What types of law? Full-term abortion? Don't like that. Don't make any sense to me. Life's precious, way too precious to consider the term full-term abortion. Rephrase that question again. My head's your questions are way too good, my friend. They're very sensible questions, so it's making it very hard. It's usually so much easier. I'm blaming you for that, Vince. Go
on. What is one type of law that you would refuse to pass regardless of the party pressures?
One type of law.
So that's multiple parties, obviously, but
yeah, that's awkward for a fledgling party. I definitely would never support any woke sexual education in the schools. I wouldn't support by any means the word full-term abortion. I find that extremely offensive. What else wouldn't I like? I wouldn't want any sort of price on carbon, for instance.
You mean what we got?
That's just rubbish. I followed that when they did that, internationally, and there was just billions of dollars going missing and lots of very stupid people making lots of money. Yeah, I know you've got me. That's a hell of a good question. I'm not coming on ever again now, Vince. You're making this way too hard. I'm having to think. Generally when we get questions, it's really simple stuff. Love you, guy. Keep going.
No,
You
that's
got
it.
me.
Actually, that was the last in the doozy, mate. That was the last one. Now you get
That's a
to
doozy, that
sell
one.
yourself
I'm
a
going to
bit.
sit back afterwards and say, you wanker, what I could have said was this, that, or the other. Look,
That's the advantage of going first. That's the
Huh?
advantage of going first, right? You get everyone else now gets to look at your interview and go, oh, I'm going to prepare for that question.
Mate, let's put some facts straight here, right, about me. I hate politicians. I hate politics. I've unfortunately invested 25 years of my life into it, so I put myself up. I don't really want to be elected, not because I don't want to do good for the people. I just don't like the idea of getting up, putting a suit on, and going hanging out with turkeys. And so that side of it's not very appealing to me. The reason I'm doing is I'm seeing the country fall in the hole, and the things I was fighting for 25 years ago have just become worse and worse and worse. And I see massive change required, and I can't bring that on my own. But I could open the door and maybe lead by example for other good people to come forward afterwards and set up a party. That's what I'm hoping to do. We've got a bit of a range of people from different parties in there, and maybe that could grow and become something. Obviously, we're in a time when this one nation thing's rising, but I think it's a populist platform where people have said they're sick to death of Labor, Liberal are falling in a hole, Liberal National Coalition's falling apart. Who do we vote for? And the obviously alternate choice to them is One Nation because Pauline's so well known. I don't know that Pauline's the answer or One Nation's maybe the answer. It's definitely a better option than the two major parties, so I don't blame Bill for going that way. But I think we'll need a new system. We need a variety of good parties in there and a variety of good minds and leaders in there to create something better than what we've endured for the last 30 or 40 years. And that may mean a selection. Obviously, when Labor get elected, they don't do it on their own. They do it with Greens votes. They do it with this and that. And I'm sure Labor really hate the thought they have to bow to the Greens, but that's how they've been elected for years. The Liberals have always had the Nationals supporting them. And then, of course, the miners, generally One Nation have preference Liberals for 20-something years, upper and lower houses across the country. It's been those combined votes that have empowered Liberals. So I think if One Nation are going to move ahead and be a possible third force over the next decade, then there needs to be some other voices like ours that are a little bit different. We have animal welfare, environment. We're very big on those things, which obviously Pauline's not, and will attract different sorts of votes. But I think if Pauline was to work with our party, for instance, say, we'd be much easier to work with than the Greens, right? Because the Greens are insane. And so we're just offering that out there. Whether we succeed or not into the future, that's yet to be seen. But I think we are a good enough team that if I was voted into the upper house, I'd bring some of my best advisors with me. We've got a guy that's interesting that's joined the party. He's running for Port Adelaide. He ran AMROS, which is a marine and biology and marine rescue, wildlife rescue. Brings a hell of a lot of information to the table. He worked at Torrens Island, and he's going to sort of blow Labor out the water on this desal issue and this algae issue. But we need a variety of people in there. And so voting for one person like me getting in, I'll bring in a team of 4 or 5, depending on the budgeting we get as a party. And that means you can make a phone call instead of people bringing me, which they do every day, help with things, and we'll have a bit of a team to do a better job of helping them. And I think you need that structural difference between parties. So, it's all nice to throw your votes into one boat, but I think we need people with different ideas that have that one common goal of putting Australians first and putting their country first. And so if we all have that, then I think that'll unite us well enough to work together.
Excellent. All right. If people wish to contact you or offer support, how do they do that?
Okay, my phone number's everywhere, but that, as you can see, it's ringing the whole time I'm sitting here, so that's a bit awkward. You can message through our website, but that's awkward too. If you contact us by the main political page on social media, which is United Voice Australia, or through my page, Mark Aldridge, we'll do our very best to get back to you. And we'll be putting up email and contact details for each of our candidates so that if you want to support them in those areas, you can. So we'll do our best to do that. So just stay in touch. So I'm pretty easy to find. Don't Google me though, because the government this time of the year like to bump up everything bad they can find about you. And so you've been told off for something, but then you won the case. The one the case gets pushed down in Google, and the thing that goes to the top. And my candidates are ringing me today and say, "Why is there all this stuff about me on Google that's never been there before?" I said, "Yeah, well, you're running an election, my friends. I'm sorry. This is how politics work. Dirty, dirty, dirty place politics. We need to clean it up, make it responsible, and we need to create new systems for our kids to learn about politics, to learn to want to educate themselves, not just have the schools tell them what's right and wrong. And we need to change the world just quite a bit, actually. And you're helping a hell of a lot by what you're doing here, because you're allowing people to see who's running and cast an informed vote, and that's so essential right now in politics."
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm hoping that's what I'm trying to be, as level-headed, and even though I have my own political ideology, if you want, but I'm just trying to give everybody the same questions, which is why it's a regime of questions instead of just having a general chat. Although I would love to have you back on for a general chat at some stage on Real Talk with Vince. Once everything
time you like. We've got to bring you around to my side of politics, because obviously I reckon it's the best one, but that's all good. As long as people out there, I'll just say this to everyone: just spend the time to work out who's running and cast the most informed vote you can, and be happy with it. Right? That's it. You do it in secret. No one knows how you voted. Vote with your heart. If you do that, we'll have some change. And if we have change, that's a really good thing for your kids' sake and this country's sake.
And
so,
that
yeah.
your preferences count.
Oh, they do. Count. The system's very broken, but they can't completely manipulate the whole thing. So you still has a lot of power. Your vote has a lot of power. You're meant to attend anyway by law. So attend and cast an informed vote, and you're happy. Everybody does that. I think we can bring some change. This year may be the year of change. This might not be quite yet, but it will be eventually. And so it's very important that we support those people with voices that we trust and understand.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today, Mark. And this will be going up later tonight. You'll be able to find it on the Real Talk page. Well, I'm telling everybody where to find it before it's even up, so that's pointless. But yeah, look at Real Talk, look at FBN Media, Facebook, TikTok, etc. It'll be going up. Feel free to share this out, Mark, on any socials you wish. And I would also love to get a chance to chat with a few of your candidates too, if we can, before the election. So if you can arrange that, that would be great.
I'll put them on to you, Vince. Keep them in line for me, will you?
Yeah, righto. So I don't know if I'm capable of that. So with that, we'll say goodbye now, and thank you very much for being the first legislative person who's running in to be on our system. So thank you for that.
That'll roll off your lips by next week, my friend.
Yeah, probably be.
I love everybody watching. Thank you all so very, very much. It's amazing to get the opportunity to talk to you. I hope that you've learned something from who I am and who our party is. That's the main thing.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you.